And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Robby Stanley alongside Nick Keyser. Joe Rexrode will be along shortly. Hope everybody's off to a wonderful start here on this Tuesday morning. We got a lot to get to on the program here today. Caroline Fenton will join us at 7 o'clock. We'll get into the Tennessee Titans and a little bit of college football bowl season with her. So looking forward to that. John Glennon from the Nashville Post dropping by at 8:30. We'll get his thoughts on Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans. Some interesting comments from Vrabel yesterday at his press conference as well. So we got a lot to get to on that front. And the Nashville Predators back in action tonight as they take on the Vancouver Canucks. Preds have won 13 out of 16, 7 out of 8, and are one of the hottest teams in the NHL right now. So we'll get into that throughout the show as well. As always, we'll take your thoughts all show long. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Nick Keyser, good morning. How are you? What's going on?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm doing good. Can't complain. It was fun to talk to some of the Predator skaters yesterday about their fathers. So got a cool story coming out later this afternoon before tonight's game. So that should be fun. And yeah, it was good. I didn't watch any of Monday Night Football last night, Robbie, but I don't think I missed too much because I know that Drew Lock tore up the field last night. I don't know if you caught any of that game last night.
Yeah, I saw some of it. The Eagles got some problems right now. They I believe that's 3 losses in a row for them. And they got, of course, anytime the Eagles lose 2 in a row, that fan base goes nuts. So they're all screaming about Nick Sirianni right now and the play calling and all those things. But they were 10-1, now they're 10-4. Seahawks win. That's a big win for the Seahawks. They get to 7-7 in a crowded NFC playoff race right now. But Drew Lock, a big win against the Philadelphia Eagles, 22 of 33, 208 yards, throws for a touchdown, quarterback rating of 94 last night. And by the way, I mean, you look at the Eagles offense, not much going on right now for the Eagles offense. Jalen Hurts has been banged up / sick for the last little bit. He was 17 to 31 for 143 yards and 2 picks last night. Not very good from Jalen Hurts. So it's a tough time for the Philadelphia Eagles right now. It feels like that San Francisco game, when they got thumped by the 49ers, they've kind of been broken ever since then. They got thumped by the 49ers, got beat by the Cowboys, and then got beat last night by Seattle on Monday Night Football. So some struggles for the Philadelphia Eagles right now.
Yeah, and by the way, Pete Carroll is now 8-0 against the Eagles all time. So I did not realize that he had won 7 in a row before last night's game. So now he's 8-0 against the high-flying Eagles. And also, like you said,
That's
the
weird.
Eagles have lost 3 in a row. They're winless in December. I believe if they were to go to the playoffs today, I've got this pulled up, the Eagles would play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that would be an interesting matchup, I think. I think they would win that game, but there's a lot just to break down in terms of the playoff picture, Robbie, but last night's game did not end very well for them whatsoever.
Yep, no question about that. So we'll see how Philadelphia responds as they move forward here. I want to start on the Preds today. So the Preds are back in action tonight. They'll take on Vancouver, a Vancouver team that has been very, very good to this point in the year. 21-9-2, I believe, is their record. And the Predators have already seen Vancouver twice this year. They've lost to them both times. But it feels like this is a better Predators team now and a different Predators team now than when they saw Vancouver last. And I mentioned the record a few minutes ago. They're 13-3-0 in their last 16 games. They have won 7 out of their last 8. They're one of the hottest teams in the league. And it leads me to ask the question, like, how did they do this? How did they turn things around so dramatically? And how sustainable is the winning that they're doing right now? And I'm not talking about winning at this clip because, 13 out of 16, that means they've gathered 26 out of the possible 32 points. That's an insane pace. And they're not going to stay on that pace. At least I don't think they're going to stay on that pace. But are they a team that when you start to navigate through the rest of what is a long grinding NHL season, are they a team that is for real and that can make the playoffs and that maybe once they get there, maybe they can be a little bit dangerous in the playoffs? That's the question I have for this team. And Nick, you've been around this team, as much as I have every single day here. And I look at what they've done here during this stretch, and I guess the thing that stands out to me that if I'm a Predators fan, I'm pretty encouraged about is that they've won games in a lot of different ways. Some of it's been goaltending where UC Saros or Kevin Lankinen has looked really good. Some of it has been outscoring teams, like that Carolina game the other night in Raleigh. They just had to outscore Carolina. It was 6-5. It was a wild back and forth game, and they were able to win a game that way. They've had a couple of games where, offensively, they've just not had it, and they've had to clamp things down defensively. They've had some games where they've needed a power play goal to win, and they've done that. They've won in a ton of different ways. And I think that's probably the thing, if I'm a Predators fan, that gives me the most hope that this could be sustainable, is that they've had to kind of go into their bag and pull out different ways to win some of these games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always look back at what the Predators do on defense a lot of the time, Robby. And I know that offense is the sexy spot that everybody is waiting to see happen on the ice. But when I see the Preds defense, they definitely struggled on that back-to-back. I think that that's always a tough test, obviously, because they've only had 3 so far this season, right? So that's always a tough thing to just encounter anytime on the schedule throughout the season. But I think that one thing that stands out to me is defensively, the lanes have started to open for UC Saros to not be, pushing to make, unnecessary saves or make unnecessary movements. And, the small goalie that he is, I think it's been important to see how much guys like Ryan McDonough, even guys like, Jeremy Lazon, and then maybe even some of Alex Carrier-Romagnosi. I think it's important to make sure that those guys are in the right place at the right time. And I think that when they're rested, yeah, they look their best. But those back-to-backs, I thought that they did as best as they possibly could to kind of keep this good stretch of hockey going. I mean, Washington is not necessarily a pushover. They've had their struggles. But most importantly, I think what you're seeing is the buy-in, and you're also seeing a lot of the key contributors on that bottom 6, if you want to call it. They are doing everything that they can. And Michael McCarron, Cole Smith, Philip Tomasino, never thought that we would have paired those 3 guys all together back at training camp. But here we are, 30 games in, and they're one of the more effective lines on the forecheck sometimes. And so that's what you get with a Predators team that is going to be spread thin for the most part. But I've been encouraged, Robby. I know you have in some regard as well. But I think that you can't necessarily always lean on UC. I know he feels good right now. I asked him yesterday a little bit about how he's feeling. And I think that's the most important thing, is making sure that he is feeling okay. And just so we're clear, too, I think this is a very unique thing about UC Saros as well. I think it's the middle of November, or even just this month. He is probably the best goaltender statistically, so to speak, I think, in the NHL. And it's been a lot of him making those big saves. I believe now this is something that Willie Donick and I have talked about. He has 4 steals so far this year. So he has stolen 4 games for the Predators, and those are 4 wins that, if you don't have them, you're probably not in the playoff. You're not in the playoff conversation whatsoever right now, Robby.
Well, those are steals that he didn't have much of until about 2 weeks ago, right? Like he's this has been kind of a recent stretch here from Saros, where he looks like the UC Saros of old. And when you factor in all the other things that they're doing really well, if you start to get him to play well in goal, which they have, I mean, that leads to a lot of winning. And that's why you see a stretch that they've been able to put together the way that they have. I mean, Forsberg's playing great. And, we've talked about his pace before. He's on pace for right around 100 points right now, which is obviously really good. He's playing some of the best hockey of his career. Big thing for him is, like, can he stay healthy the whole way? Because he's had some problems over his career, especially recently, of staying healthy throughout the course of an 82-game season. I look at Ryan O'Reilly, the impact that he's had both offensively, but I think also in that locker room. And then defensively, it's been really interesting to watch what they've done. We've talked about the Tyson Barrie situation, and he's gotten in there a couple times over the last few games. How long is that going to drag out? Is there some reparation that can happen there with the relationship between him and the Predators and the playing time and all those things? Or is the trade just automatic from him at this point? There's only, at this point in the year, a handful of teams that can take on his contract. without the Predators retaining any salary. So what does that look like? But I think they've developed some nice depth there on the defensive side of things. And look, they're in a better spot than I thought they'd be. I mean, I had them as a fringe, kind of a bubble playoff team heading into the year. And look, they're not too far past the bubble line right now. But with the way that they played over the past month, I mean, you're talking about that stretch, one of the best teams in the league with what they've been able to do. And you look now at the standings in the division, they're 4 points up on Arizona on the wild card spot right now. They've got the number one spot, and then you look above them, they're only 3 points back of Winnipeg, 4 points back of Colorado and Dallas. So those big boys at the top of the division for the Predators are in sight. And I didn't think, especially when you start the season 5-10-0, the way that they did, I didn't think that we'd get to a point this year where the Predators are within striking distance of some of the top teams in the division. And by the way, I mean, this week is huge from that standpoint, too. You got the Vancouver game tonight. You're on the road Thursday against Philly. And then Saturday, you got Dallas coming in here. Dallas, like I said, the Predators only 4 points back of them. So the return of Matt Duchene on Saturday at Bridgestone Arena. Nice afternoon hockey, which I'm a big fan of. That's a huge one coming up on Saturday for the Predators. So it's been a really impressive run here. Can they keep things going and keep this winning clip going this week against some really good teams they're going to be seeing? 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We're off and running on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts on the Predators. What have you made of this stretch of 13-3-0 that they put together in their last 16 games? How sustainable do you think this is for the Predators? 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Live from our 1025 The Game studio, brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Robby Stanley alongside Nick Keyser. Joe Rexrode will be along here shortly this morning. We're taking your thoughts on the Predators. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. Preds are 13-3-0 in their last 16 games, and they've gotten themselves into a playoff spot now. There's still a lot of hockey left to be played. We're not even halfway through the year. Preds have played 31 games, which means they got 51 more to go. That's terrible math, actually. No, it isn't. That's right. 51 more to go, Nick. That's some Hendersonville High School math for you. So, can they keep things going? Can they keep things going this week in a big week for them, starting tonight against Vancouver, on the road Thursday against Philadelphia, and at home on Saturday before the Christmas break comes as they take on the Dallas Stars? Three important games for the Predators this week. I thought the fact that they were able to go through this back-to-back the other day in Carolina and then at home against Washington, and they got all four of those points, that was pretty impressive to me, the way that they were able to do that, especially the way the Carolina game went, and it was back and forth, some offensive chances that were traded all game long. And then Washington, I thought the Predators came out, played really well in the Washington game. The Capitals kind of settled down in the second period, and Ovechkin was firing the puck from everywhere. But the Predators shut the door in the third period, and they were making some big mistakes in the third period early in the year that was either costing them games or costing them, opportunities to get back into games when they had the opportunities to do so. And it feels like, Nick, they're not really making those mistakes anymore. And I give guys like Ryan McDonough and Roman Josi a lot of credit for that. They're making the right plays with the puck. And defensively, it feels like the Predators have been way better than they were to begin the season lately.
Yeah, they don't feel like a team that is rushing themselves as often as we had seen at the start of the season, Robby. I think that's been the part of the system that's been a positive for Andrew Brunette and his offense, I feel like. And so, I mean, I'm not really positive what else has really changed for them other than just getting adjusted to the system. Maybe it's just the grit, and he's talked about will, like having the will to win, and coaches go to that quite a bit, but I think that is partly true for sure. It's just how determined is your group, and I think they've battled well through adversity as well, and that's not something that every team is handling very well. And this season in the NHL, there's a lot of injuries with the Blackhawks on top of just what already personnel that they have, so that's not going well for them. But just in general, to kind of persevere through some of those struggles early on is something that I've been keeping track of. But also, one guy as well, I think that has kind of slowly but surely had to kind of play some catch up has been Cody Glass. He just played his 10th game not that long ago. I think he's about a dozen games in to the season. And so for them to get their 73rd back-to-back sweep in franchise history, and that was their first since March of this year, by the way, when I believe it was when they played the LA Kings and then they played the Anaheim Ducks. So that was interesting. That was when you saw a much younger Predators group at the end of last season around the trade deadline when guys like Nino Niederreiter got traded, Matthias Ekholm got traded away. So I think overarchingly, this is not, I don't want to call it a shock necessarily, but I do think it's an encouraging step forward, especially if you're Barry Trotz thinking, okay, well, I can rely on some of the guys I signed more so this summer, like Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shin somewhat. So, more so Ryan O'Reilly, obviously. I think his work ethic has been a great example for a lot of the younger guys, and I think it's truly paying off. And who would have thought that Gus Nyquist would be playing some of his best hockey lately over the last few
really
seasons? Good. Yeah, he's been awesome. I think the charisma that he's carried, and I think just overall the enthusiasm that he's had in some conversations. I asked him about how it's been working on special teams with them. He says it kind of feels like it's been so seamless for him. So I think it has been for a lot of this group, and that's certainly a good sign for them moving forward into the new year, Robby.
Well, the Cody Glass thing is interesting because, like you said, they've done a lot of this without him because of injury. He's had a tough go of it this year. He had a lower body injury that kept him out, and then he came back and played, I think, like 2 games, and then got immediately hit with an upper body
Yep.
injury. And at the end of the Saturday's game, I mean, he got basically hauled down from behind on a breakaway, and it looked like he'd been banged up from that. And he was out on the ice yesterday at practice, so that's a good sign. It looks like he'll be able to go tonight. But 13 games from him this year, he's got 1 assist. Like they've gotten basically nothing offensively from Cody Glass, and they've been able to do this without that. So I mean, Novak's been out for a long stretch. He's getting back into a groove now. You know that's I guess you start going through the list of encouraging things if you're the Predators. Like if they could ever get Glass some traction and get him in there and he can stay healthy, like does he start to get things going a little bit offensively? Novak has been I think, a little slow out of the gate coming back from the injury. We've seen what he can do. So if they get him back up to speed, does the offense continue to be a thing that's consistent with this group? Because look, as well as Forsberg and O'Reilly and Nyquist and that top line is playing, and they're playing really well. And you look at some of the numbers, and they're right there, top 10 in the league in a lot of those categories. So that's great. But as well as those guys are playing, I do think you're going to need another line that is reliable offensively. And like you said, Tomasino looks really good right now. He's playing well. McCarron has stepped up and played well. They've gotten some timely goals. I mean, Colton Sissons has scored 10 goals so far this year. I mean, I think his career high is 15 that he set back in like 2018. So he's on pace to blow past that this year. So it's not like they're not getting secondary scoring. Yakov Trennin's played really well lately, so they're getting some secondary scoring. But if you could keep Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Nyquist playing at the pace they're at right now, and then a guy like either a Novak or a Glass can come alive offensively, then you might really have something in terms of a team that you start to look at and say, could they be dangerous? Like, I'm not saying cup contender because I just look at this roster and I don't see cup contender. But can you turn into a team where you get to the first round of the playoffs, and whether it's like a Vegas or a Colorado or a Dallas, do they look around and say, man, we really don't want to play these guys? Like I do not want to play the Nashville Predators. Maybe. Right now, are they there yet? I don't know. I mean, you look at the Predators roster, and like if you're an opponent looking at them, O'Reilly, McDonough, Luke Shen, Forsberg, Yossi. I mean, they got a lot of guys that have played a lot of playoff hockey, a lot of big games in their career. And we talk about, a youth movement with the Predators and kind of the young roster shakeup that they have. And they do have some young guys that are playing important roles, but it's not as young of a roster as I think some people think it is. They got some experience to them, and not only experience, some big game experience, and some guys that have performed in high pressure moments. And I think as the season has gone on, that's really served them well with the way that some of these guys have played, and really kind of, I guess, the calming influence that they've been. Like I did a story last week for NHL.com. I think Ryan McDonough has been huge for this group, not only with the way that he's played. He and Yossi, when they've been together, I think have been really good. But all the intangibles that Barry Trotz was looking for as he kind of broke this thing down over the summer, and Johansson was shipped off, and Duchesne was shipped off, and he brought in O'Reilly and Shen and Nyquist and all these guys. I think that part of it is playing out exactly the way that Barry Trotz hoped it would have.
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing I keep in perspective too is while all of that experience is valuable, the thing that matters the most that we don't get to see, and this is telling, is what they get to say to each other during breaks or when they have to make just those quick adjustments on the bench, whatever it is like that. And, from watching the guys on the ice and then when they get back to the bench, there's been a couple of instances, Robby, where I don't catch this often, but most times I'll see some guys go back. They get frustrated. There's a little bit of the emotion, obviously, like we always see in sports, but some of these guys go back and I see them talking to each other. I see Ryan O'Reilly pointing around the ice every now and then, and some of the other guys. It doesn't matter who was with who. Yuso Parson and I think Kiefer Sherwood. Yeah, it was Kiefer that told me that both of them feel like wherever they're at in the lineup, all they have to worry about is being themselves. And if you're doing that and you're complimenting the other players as best as possible, I think that's what the Preds are looking for right now. I think that's what Andrew Burnett has wanted. And when he's talked about people filling in roles, that's made the biggest difference for sure. So now I'd love to hear Joe's thoughts. I'm sure that we'll get him here shortly, Robby. But yes, I've been very encouraged by what I've seen from these Nashville Predators to start off this season, and I hope it does just continue for their sake. But I guess we'll have to see this weekend. Can they stand tall against a really tough team in Dallas?
615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we'll get into the Tennessee Titans and the injury to the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. Is this the last that we've seen from Will Levis this season? We'll get more into that coming up on the other side. Make sure you tune in to 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt men's basketball. The Commodores take on Western Carolina at Memorial Gym. Tip off at 6 o'clock. Pregame beginning at 5:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
How similar is Will's injury to what Ryan went through these last couple of years?
I think the mechanism is the same, as similar, and those are things that make it difficult, and those are things that come up as you're getting tackled or in a pile or anything like that.
He dealing with an ankle.
Yeah, just kind of same thing he has been dealing with.
That was Mike Vrabel yesterday at his press conference discussing the injury to Will Levis. And Joe, we talked yesterday. Welcome into the program, Joe Rexrode. We talked yesterday about Will Levis, his injury, and how maybe it didn't look as bad as it could have been. Vrabel went through that kind of spiel yesterday and how it's similar to Tannehill's injuries that he's had in terms of the high ankle sprain. Didn't come out and say it was a high ankle sprain, just said similar. And Jeremy Fowler of ESPN last night said Will Levis dealing with a high ankle sprain per source. Still uncertain whether Tennessee needs to sit him or for how long, but a promising rookie campaign, faces a health challenge this week. So a high ankle sprain for Will Levis. And Joe, to me, if that's what it is, probably needs to mean that we've seen the last of Will Levis for this season, would be the way that I would approach it.
Yeah, I would agree. So am I on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I can't see anything. This is first of all, I'd like to apologize. This is the second time in the history of the show that I had an alarm malfunction. I'm on the show much earlier than the first time, which I believe was with Porth as a producer.
I believe that's
and
correct.
Now I have a computer that I totally forgot to put that green thing on. And I woke up on my own at 6:10. And now my computer is acting like it's 1987 and it's a Commodore 64, which actually wouldn't even have been internet then. So I apologize to the listeners and also whoever's watching. What do you see on the screen? Just my face looking constipated?
I think it's just me.
Okay. Well, that's better then. So anyway, we'll soldier on just like the Titans.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the Will Levis part of this is going to be interesting to see if he does play again. So is this as simple as Tannehill? Because there's a segment right now, Joe, of the Titans fan base that wants to see Malik Willis, to quote, see what he has these last three games. And I'm like, my goodness, have we not seen what he has to this point?
Any doctor, not pretending to be one, but any doctor would tell you that a high ankle sprain means weeks that you're hurt. And so if that's truly a high ankle sprain, then I think that Will Levis is possibly done for the year.
Yeah, I would say that is probably the case at this point. And then there's the Tannehill part of this too of, I talked about this yesterday. And look, I have no doubt that if they approach Ryan Tannehill this week and they want him to play, that he will play. I did say, though, like from a business standpoint, if I'm him, I'm looking at this offensive line in front of me and saying, all right, well, I want to go get another starting job in the league. I want to be a starting quarterback again. And the guys in front of me right now cannot block and are not going to give me much of a chance for success to play well at this point. So is there like a business decision aspect? Like Vrabel yesterday did not commit to Ryan Tannehill being the starter if Will Levis can't go. And I'm not necessarily surprised by that because his response was basically like, well, we'll see how Levis progresses this week and what that looks like and all those things. But it is interesting to me that he didn't come out right and say, well, yeah, like if Levis can't go, then Tannehill will be the quarterback. So like, I do wonder if Levis isn't the guy on Sunday, which I have a tough time thinking that he will be with a high ankle sprain and 1 week of action coming off of it, is Tannehill going to be the one that plays? And if he is, what does that mean for the Titans? What does that mean for their chances to win the game? I mean, they got Seattle coming up at home. Seattle just with a big win last night against Philadelphia. If they can't get Levis to be in there, it's the Tannehill Henry show to close things out this season would be my guess. I think you got to be really careful here if you're the Titans. And hopefully, like the ankle would get to a point where maybe it's full go or close to full go by the end of the regular season, that Jacksonville game. But when you start talking about high ankle sprain, and it's been interesting to see like the rest of the league and the way that they view these things, because Trevor Lawrence had the high ankle sprain and then he played the next week. Patrick Mahomes had a quote high ankle sprain last year in the playoffs, and then he was able to continue to play. So like, how severe is the high ankle sprain? Because we've seen Tannehill deal with a high ankle sprain that's kept him out multiple weeks in each of the past 2 seasons. So what's the severity level of the high ankle sprain? And if it's even close enough where it's limiting his mobility and he can't protect himself, then this is a no-brainer if you're the Titans at that point and you can't put him out there. Like it's got to be one of those things where he can move around well enough to protect himself and he can get out of harm's way before you ever even consider putting him out there if you're the Titans against Seattle coming up on Sunday. Did we lose Joe again, Keezer?
Yes, it looks like we've lost Joe temporarily.
Okay.
But I can chime in for just a few minutes here until we get him back. We will work avidly to get Joe back. Maybe he'll have to dial in or something. But anywho, sorry about that. We will get Joe back with us. But Robby, I do think it's interesting to see what the quarterback situation has been overarchingly with the Titans. I think that maybe when thinking about, the history of high ankle sprains in the organization with Ryan Tannehill, now it's with Will Levis. I mean, if Ryan Tannehill's healthy at this point, you've got to play him. I have no problem seeing him. It doesn't really matter at this point. I think you can kind of get to see, the glory days of what the Titans were a few years ago. And I think that might be kind of, a good little homage, I guess, to what the Titans were a few years ago. Not necessarily all the way the same team, but I think the fans can appreciate, making sure that their coveted quarterback and Will Levis is rested and that he can be there along for the ride. Just a few more games. Seattle just won last night. You've got that on tape to go watch now. You've got them on a, one-day advantage now at this point. So I'm kind of curious to see what Mike Vrabel decides to do. He didn't really have a definitive answer yesterday. I was actually chatting about this with Joe at Predators practice yesterday. So that's interesting. So we'll see what they end up doing, but Vrabel has tried to not divulge too much into this as he did yesterday. So I guess we'll have to find out, Robby.
Yep, and like I said, if there's ever even a question on the Levis part of this in terms of his ability to move around and protect himself, then I say just shut him down. And like I said, I don't know the severity of the high ankle sprain, but like weighing risk versus reward here. Like what are the pros and cons of having him play? Like the pros are, he gets more game experience and he gets an opportunity to develop more chemistry with a Burks or with a Hopkins or get more live reps at the NFL level. But we've seen enough of that this year, particularly with him and Hopkins. I think heading into the offseason, if you're the Titans, that you've got a piece to build around in Will Levis. Now, is he going to be perfect? No. Is he going to be the long-term answer at quarterback where you have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl? I don't know. Like I've seen some things that make me think maybe he can be, but I'm not willing to completely buy in on that yet. But I do think you've seen enough if you're the Titans, where if you had to shut him down for the rest of the regular season, you at least have enough body of information to know that he's got the chance to be special with the arm that he brings to the table, with some of the intangible things that I think have been really good from him so far this season. So it's not like if you're the Titans, there's no body of information to work with here, where I think that gives you the opportunity, if you're Vrabel, if you're Carthon, and you're mapping out the future of this team, it gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more cautious and a little bit more patient with Will Levis in terms of making sure that he's completely healthy before you put him back out there. And is it realistic coming off a high ankle sprain? Is it realistic that he's completely healthy again in these last 3 weeks before the regular season comes to a close? I don't know. If it's not, then it's a no-brainer to me. You shut him down, you go with Ryan Tannehill, and you close out the regular season, and then you move on to the offseason part of the program and try to build up an offensive line that doesn't get two quarterbacks hurt this year, which is what this one has done to this point. So that's the other thing, too. Like with that offensive line, that makes me even more hesitant to put Levis back out there, given the fact that it's not like the equation is going to change these last few weeks. The quarterback, when they're in there, is going to be under duress. They're going to be taking hits, and I think Levis has taken enough of those so far this year. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Will Levis dealing with a high ankle sprain, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. Is that the last we'll see from Will Levis this season? Should it be the last we'll see from Will Levis? We'll take your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at Teddy's Tavern this Sunday from 9:30 to 11:30 for our NFL pregame show. They'll break down the Titans' Week 16 matchup against the Seahawks and give you the latest updates before the game. Our NFL pregame show presented by Parma Tractor and Equipment and Beast Unleashed. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We'll be joined by Caroline Fenton coming up at 7 o'clock. We'll get her thoughts on the Titans and some college football as well. We'll be joined by John Glennon at 8:30 from the Nashville Post. So we're looking forward to all that coming up on the program. 615-737-1025. So Jeremy Fowler of ESPN putting it out there yesterday that Will Levis is dealing with a high ankle sprain. And our question is pretty simple. Should that be the end of the road for Will Levis this regular season? Should the Titans shut him down for the rest of the regular season with 3 games remaining and with no playoff playoff chances for the Titans to this point? And if so, is Ryan Tannehill the one that should be starting for the Titans at quarterback? Is that good for Tannehill? Is that bad for Tannehill? As I would assume, he looks to try to be a starting quarterback somewhere in the league next season. We'll take your thoughts on all that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. I got a texter that says, shut him down. This offensive line is terrible, and he's going to get seriously hurt or develop some ghost. He was already underthrowing and making terrible decisions in that Texans game. And we talked about Levis's performance in the Texans game yesterday. So they go to start the game right down the field. He's 4 of 4, I believe, for 83 yards. So 4 of 4 for 83 yards to begin the game. And then the Titans, the rest of the day, in total for the whole game, they managed 204 net yards in a 70-minute football game. 204 net yards. That's all they have. Obviously, it's not good. And Levis was a part of that. But, you know, when you get hit 11 times and sacked 7 times, it's hard to generate much in the passing game when you're constantly under duress that way. So that just kind of is what it is with this offensive line. And if Tannehill's the starter on Sunday against Seattle, that's the mess that he's being thrown back into at that point. We welcome Joe Rexrode back into the program. So, Joe, if it's Ryan Tannehill on Sunday, what do we think's going through Tannehill's mind as he steps once again behind that offensive line with 3 games remaining in the regular season, no playoffs to play for, and for his sake, an NFL future for that I would assume he hopes includes being a starting quarterback or at least a bridge quarterback somewhere next season?
Yeah, well, and the fact that he does want that and he should want that, he's good enough to be a starter somewhere, I still think. Hey, you know, any idea that he might look at the situation and say no thanks, to me is just fantasy. I mean, it's not going to happen. I mean, I suppose if he did that, it wouldn't eliminate him from other teams. I mean, he's good enough that, you know, if you're good enough, you're good enough. But I don't think that's how he would go about his business. You know, I mean, I think he's a pro and he's gonna be a team first guy and he's gonna play. It's not good. The playing itself isn't going to help him much because it's hard to, you know, have much production or good performances with this offensive line, with this offense as a whole. But I mean, he's definitely going to do it. And, I think that's what we're going to see. I mean, certainly this week, I mean, even if it's just a low ankle sprain, why you would even think about trotting out Will Levis with any kind of limitation, it makes no sense to me. They'll talk about it all week. Yeah, we'll see how Will is and blah, blah, blah. But there's no way he's playing this week. And then I guess maybe you could look at like the finale, you know, could he be good enough? But I mean, Will Levis at 80%, Will Levis at 90%. Why? I mean, I don't understand. There's no reasoning for it. There's no rationale. You've seen him play plenty. You've seen a lot more good than bad. You know that you're going to be building around him. And the idea of getting him hurt again would just be insane to me. So I think it's 3 games of Tannehill.
Well, what about this from Ed on the text line? It says, doesn't it have to be Malik Willis? Don't they need to try and develop him? Maybe he gets hot and it raises his value to possibly move him. My response to that, Joe, is I've seen enough of Malik Willis. I think that you just go with Tannehill the rest of the regular season. And, you know, Willis probably on the roster to begin next season, but I think it makes a lot of sense for the Titans to be in the market for a more experienced veteran backup quarterback this offseason. But what do you make of the idea of giving it to Malik Willis for these last 3 games?
Well, I mean, especially for the draft watchers, that sounds like a great idea. I mean, if you know that's your best chance of going out, playing hard, doing all you can, but still basically locking in a loss. I don't. But in all seriousness, I'm with you. I think it makes sense for the Titans to probably look around and try to get a good backup. I mean, look, they're going to try to fix the offensive line in one off season. They're going to do a lot, I think, to it, and we'll see if it works or not. But either way, it's hard to imagine that all of a sudden you're going to have this brick wall in front of Will Levis next year. So you got to look at the Indianapolis Colts and say, man, pretty smart of them to get Gardner Minshew while they had, and of course, when they got him, it was like maybe he'll be the bridge starter for a little bit or whatever. But I mean, it's got to be something like that. I think you've got to look for someone like that who can actually win you some games if Levis does get hurt next year. At this point, you have to assume the offensive line's still not going to be great. So I'm with you. As far as Malik's value, yeah, I mean, look, I think Malik Willis has gotten better. I think Malik Willis is good enough to be in this league. But I don't think that there's – I don't know in 3 games, what he can do to completely change things over. And again, he's playing behind the same offensive line. I mean, he at least has more opportunity to get away from rushers and make plays with his feet. But I don't think – it's just a bad situation for any quarterback right now.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And, I mean, that's the same thing for Tannehill, right? Like, it's not like the offensive line is going to all of a sudden play better when Tannehill's in front of him. Like, he's going to have to be able to get the ball out quick and move around, and they've already gotten him hurt one time this year. So, I can't imagine he's overly excited about stepping back behind this offensive line here. David in Arkansas says, if Levis can't go, I'd like to see Tannehill finish the season, especially the Jaguars game at home. Whether fans agree or not, he deserves a send-off as he was part of turning the franchise around. Fans need to appreciate what he has done these last few years. That Jacksonville game, if it plays out this way, Joe, could be pretty interesting from the standpoint of Tannehill potentially being the starting quarterback, and everybody's thoughts in the stadium that day is going to be, is this the last time that Derrick Henry is stepping on the field in a Tennessee Titans uniform?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that Tannehill, of course, Derrick Henry is going to get a send-off. I mean, again, it's one of those weird situations. It's not like the guy's retiring, so you don't know that you're giving him a send-off, but you're giving him a just-in-case send-off. But Tannehill deserves one too, There's no doubt. I mean, those guys teamed up, and I still don't think Tannehill gets enough credit for his role in it, but those guys teamed up for, a couple of the best teams in Titans history. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, really, for 3 teams that I think were at least excellent. I mean, very good teams and teams that, were good enough to possibly win a Super Bowl. I mean, they were real contenders. I mean, and I don't know, other than obviously that stretch from, 99 to like 03, right? I mean, with the one bad team mixed in there. I mean, there hasn't been any other stretch, anything like that in the history of the Titans history, at least, of the franchise. So I think at least it would be kind of nice for those guys to kind of have some moments together.
I got a texter that said they should make Vrabel play quarterback and see what it's like to play with Swiss cheese for an offensive line. Maybe he'd finally take it seriously this offseason. I've seen Matadors put up more resistance. This is from a texter on the text line. Well, just send Vrabel out there and say, look, Vrabel, this is what it's like to play behind this offensive line. Maybe an interesting strategy for the Titans.
Well, I mean, he gets out there and gets into the D-line drills, so he's still active with the players. I mean, also has played some offense. He's caught several passes, several touchdowns in his career. So, I mean, I understand the sentiment. I don't think that they didn't take it seriously last offseason. I mean, gosh, half the talk after last season was got to fix the offensive line, right? They just did a poor job. They just did a bad job of going about it. That's, especially at the one spot, of course.
Coming up next, we'll be joined by Caroline Fenton. We'll get her thoughts on the Titans, get her thoughts on some college football action as well. Man, that transfer portal is wild so far this offseason in college football. More on that coming up next. Make sure you tune in later this morning at 8:45 for your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click and win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Pick to Click brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Robby Stanley alongside Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. And as we do every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, we welcome in our good friend Caroline Fenton to the program, host of Caroline, Willie, and D-Mace. You can check it out every morning here on 1025 The Game, starting at 11 o'clock. Caroline, good morning. How are you?
Morning. I hear we have no Joe Rexrode.
Rexrode's struggling this morning, but we're
no.
implementing a solution that we believe is going to work eventually. But he's
I'll
struggling.
keep my fingers crossed that it does, because the show's just not the same without him. But Rob, if you have to captain the ship, you're a pretty darn good captain.
We'll see what we can do. I mean, Joe and technology, it's not a good combination, as we've seen many times.
Not a great marriage. It is not. But he tries.
Speaking of not a great marriage, Will Levis in this offensive line, it continues to get quarterbacks hurt. It's gotten Tannehill hurt this year. Now it's gotten Levis hurt as well with a high ankle sprain. Jeremy Fowler putting that out there last night. And I mean, look, Caroline, there's 3 weeks left in the regular season. It's a high ankle sprain, so there's a decent chance he's probably done anyway. I think it makes some sense for the Titans to kind of look at where they're at right now, look at what they've seen from Levis, and maybe shut him down and protect him the rest of this regular season. But what do you think of the decision that's now in front of the Titans now that we know it's a high ankle sprain for Will Levis?
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to see any more Will Levis for the rest of the season. I would be surprised if we did. 1, injury, and 2, if I'm the Titans, I can't help but think, what's the point? Like, what is the point of rolling him back out there behind that god-awful offensive line and risking an injury getting any worse? And when I brought that up yesterday, D-Mace did not like that at all. And I get it. It's the former player in him of you're never going to just sit out, where if you're not playing, you view it as being benched. You view it as being not good enough. I totally understand that from his perspective. But from the Titans, you have to weigh the risk versus reward factor. You're out of the playoffs. Like, you're going to be last in the division. So throwing Will Levis out there, risking injuring your greatest asset even further, it's not worth it. And I would even have the conversation of, do we play Jeffrey Simmons? I know you're not trying to tank. You're trying to lose, or excuse me, you're not trying to lose. You're trying to win football games, but it's the what's the point factor. I said yesterday, I think I would roll out there with Malik Willis. If it's not going to be Will Levis, roll out there with Malik Willis. You know what you have in Ryan Tannehill. You're probably not going to have Ryan Tannehill next season. Who's your backup next season? Probably Malik Willis, right? Well, this is now his opportunity where you can make your decision. Are you going to be the backup or not? Like, that's probably the ceiling for Malik Willis as a backup in this league. But I also do understand that you have 2 divisional games left, one in Houston, after you just enraged the entire city of Houston wearing the Houston Oilers uniforms. And Amy Adams-Strunk does not like to lose to Houston. She does not want to be embarrassed. So Mike Vrabel might understand that rolling Malik Willis out there is going to get you absolutely embarrassed. Is that putting his job too much at risk? Honestly, maybe.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I'm with you. Like, the Tannehill part, like Tannehill, he wants to be a starting quarterback in this league. Right. I'm interested to see if he gets an opportunity to do that this offseason, or if he's going to be a bridge quarterback or a high-level backup. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like for Tannehill. But like from the Titans standpoint, I agree with you. Number one, protecting your greatest asset. I do think, and I'm with D-Mace on his point in general, but I do think quarterback's a little bit different. Like when it's quarterback and it's you're protecting, as you put it, the best asset that you have, I do think you have to view that a little bit differently. But the Willis as a backup thing is interesting, because I'm looking at it, Caroline, and I'm saying, okay, if you're going with Levis next year, I would love to see them go get a veteran backup quarterback that's not expensive, but has played some games where Malik Willis doesn't have to be the quarterback. But if you were ever going to give him like a true look and an opportunity to prove that he could be a backup quarterback, maybe these next 3 games could be it.
And look, he may have already proven to you that he can't do it.
He might have.
You may have already seen all that you need to see to know that, hey, Malik, we love you. It's not going to work out. You're one Will Levis injury away from Malik Willis being your starting quarterback. I don't want this team to be in that position. I don't think that team wants to be in that position. But if you roll with Ryan Tannehill, yes, Ryan Tannehill gives you the best opportunity to win. But right now, how important is it to win? Right now, and I hate talking about draft stock in December. I hate that. But right now, you're looking at like maybe replacing 3-4 offensive linemen. Good draft stock, good draft position would do a whole lot for this team. So it's a tough decision to make. I do think that we do see Ryan Tannehill just for the let's prove to everybody that we're trying to go out with a bang factor. Let's prove to everybody that we mean it when we say that we want to win as many games as possible throughout the rest of the 3 games of the season, even though we're out of the playoffs. But man, it just feels like a whole lot of what's the point?
So in college
depressing.
football, it is very depressing. There's no question about that. So in college football, the transfer portal has been pretty wild to watch that shake out so far this offseason. You got quarterbacks entering the portal left and right. You got Vanderbilt losing like half their team, and now it looks like they're making a little bit of a comeback. And then there's Ole Miss, who Lane Kiffin's been whining about the transfer portal for like 3 years, and now apparently they're just buying everyone. And Ole Miss is Tyler Barron's gone there. Juice Wells has gone there. What do you make of all the movement we've seen in the portal to this point?
Lane Kiffin doing his absolute best Nick Saban impression yet again. Complaining about changes in college football and then absolutely dunking on everyone else in said changes, because Ole Miss might land Walter Nolan, who's the top defensive player in the transfer portal. He transferred away from Texas A&M. If they do, they get Walter Nolan, Tyler Barron, and Juice Wells. Ole Miss might be the favorite to win the SEC West, which is wild, which is absolutely shocking. The transfer portal is absolutely insane. But if I'll look at quarterbacks, for example. If I'm a quarterback, I can't help but look at 3 out of the 4 players who were sitting on stage at the Heisman Trophy ceremony just a couple of weeks ago. I can't help but look at Jaden Daniels, whose career looked like he was dead in the water at Arizona State, that turned around in his second year at LSU and won the Heisman Trophy. I can't help but look at Bo Nix, who became kind of the butt of all of our jokes at Auburn, turned himself into a Heisman contender. Michael Penix Jr., who got hurt every single year at Indiana, of all places, turns around, now makes Washington a college football playoff contender. Like, if I'm a quarterback stuck in a situation that I don't want to be in, where I'm either not playing, I don't like the coaching situation, I don't like the direction of a program, what's helping me? How could I help but think I could be the next Michael Penix. I could be the next Jaden Daniels. I could be the next Joe Burrow. I could be the next Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, whatever transfer portal quarterback you want to choose. It's tempting because the stories that we see are the success stories. What we don't see as much are the quarterbacks, the players at any position in general that transfer and then end up in the exact same situation that they were in before. Like, for example, Walker Howard was a 5-star quarterback from Louisiana who committed to LSU. LSU was his absolute dream school. Redshirted his freshman year, and year 2, he said, look, I don't need to be a starter. I just want a path to being able to see the field. He transferred to Ole Miss. Ole Miss then brings in another quarterback in the transfer portal. He's pushed even further on the depth chart at Ole Miss. Jackson Dart decides to come back for another year. Now he's in year 3 in college football. He's already transferred, and he's in the exact same position that he would have been at LSU. So there's plenty of stories that are, on the front cover of every news story of the success stories of transfers. What we don't hear a lot about is the fact that the grass isn't always greener. But with now money involved in everything, it's essentially like the free agency tour.
Yeah, it really is. It's wild to watch right now. Last thing for you, Caroline, and I found this to be pretty interesting because it's the announcement season in college football in terms of such and such is not playing in a bowl game. Like, Jay Daniels had this nice video in the LSU film room where he's kind of sitting down in the chair announcing that he's not playing in whatever bowl they're playing in. We've not heard anything about Joe Milton.
Put some respect on the Relia Quest Bowl.
Hey, they keep changing all these bowl games. Like tonight, I'm sure you're all in tonight for UTSA and Marshall and the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. I'm sure everybody's looking forward to that one, but I can't keep up with all these sponsor changes.
That's not real. That's not a real bowl. Like the famous Toastery Bowl. What is that?
I'm just looking forward to the Pop-Tart Bowl. That's what I've been looking forward to all bowl season at this point.
First
We need the
edible
Pop-Tart Bowl.
mascot in the history of college football.
Oh, just absolutely beautiful.
Some
We've
things don't need to be edible.
maybe not. We've not heard whether or not Joe Milton is going to play, which is interesting because I think Tennessee fans want to see Nico, obviously, and they want to see him play a significant amount of time in the Iowa game. And then there's the Milton standpoint, who is trying to get drafted. And I don't know, like right now, is he going to be a 5th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, an undrafted free agent? Like, I have no idea what's going to happen with Joe Milton. It's interesting that we've not heard one way or the other whether or not he's playing.
It is interesting because from Joe Milton's perspective, I wonder how much can you really do in a single game, in a bowl game, where there's gonna be opt-outs, where it's not a New Year's Six bowl where all eyes are on that bowl.
Against Iowa, by the way, which is just going to be so disgusting out there.
Disgusting, and I'm so excited for it. Like, this is truly sicko committee content that we're gonna see. Tennessee's offense versus Iowa's defense. I wonder, what can you really do for your draft stock in one game, in a bowl game that nobody's watching, where I don't even know how many players that from Iowa or Tennessee are opting out. I tend to believe there's probably a handful. What can you really do to your draft stock? I think I view it like it's really just the risk of getting injured. And maybe that drops Joe Milton from a 5th-round pick to a 7th-round pick, or a 6th-round pick to a 7th. I don't know. I just really wonder from a player's perspective, if you're trying to get drafted, you're not a 1st-round pick, what's the help versus hurt factor? But I think that the best possible thing for Tennessee fans is Joe Milton sits and Nico gets the start. Because he needs experience. He's going to be your starter next year, I assume. I don't know. I haven't heard anything different. So you need to get him some experience, some game reps, get him acclimated in what it feels like to go into a game knowing that you're the guy. He's probably known that he's going to have to come off the bench cold a few times this past season, but game planning with the coaches, mentally walking into the stadium that day knowing I am going to take the first snap of the game. He needs to start getting acclimated into that role in a game where I hate that we now live in this era of bowl games not mattering, and a game that really, frankly, doesn't really matter. And if he turns the ball over a few times, fine. You can work on that in the offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. Caroline, I just got a telegram from Joe Rexrode apologizing for not being with us here on this segment.
Did a pigeon deliver that message?
Yes, it did.
Well, Joe Rexrode, I miss you dearly, but I will see him tomorrow at 5 p.m.
That's right. Caroline, great stuff as always. Thanks for being with us, and have a Merry Christmas. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate you, Rob. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Absolutely. Caroline Fenton joins us every Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock here on the program, and you can check her out every morning on the station in general at 11 o'clock, 11 to 2, Caroline, Willie, and D-Mace. Coming up next, we'll get into Tennessee and the decision upcoming for Joe Milton. Should he play? Should he not play? And how much of Nico will we see in their bowl game against Iowa? That's coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits tonight for MTSU men's basketball. The Blue Raiders have a road matchup against St. Mary's with pregame beginning at 8:30 and tip-off at 8 o'clock tonight. Coverage also available on 9:30 on the 93.3 Classic app and at 93.3classichits.com. Pregame at 7:30 tonight. Tip-off at 8 o'clock. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We welcome in Joe Rexrode back to the program. Joseph, good morning. How are things going?
Yeah, this will be a real test of my ability to keep my composure while doing the show. I am so mad right now. I can't even really put it into words. And I just realized that I brought this POS computer that I'm about to smash into the wall on the air and turn it into like a rock show where the guitarist smashes freaking guitar, and I forgot the mouse, so I can't even use it anyway. So I don't know what's going on the rest of the show. Someone should probably do the rant for me in 20 minutes, or I'm going to say F-bombs all over the air and get fired. So that's where things are. How are you doing?
It's a great morning.
Yeah.
I'm doing much better now that you're with us again. It's like a long lost brother reunited on the radio airwaves this morning.
That's really sweet. I was listening to Caroline, and I just want to point out, and I've done this too, and we all have to work on this. There is no SEC West anymore. It does not exist anymore. The SEC
true.
West, the SEC East, it's just a big mashup of teams that'll have. I mean, that'll be fun too, by the way. You know, if we're going to keep doing the stupid conference title games. That'll be fun to have. We'll go back to the BCS system. You know, the SEC is so weak they won't even play 9 freaking games. Just an absolute joke. I'm just going to complain about everything today. And so we're going to have these schedules that are completely. One team will play a schedule that's like completely unrecognizable from another, and then we'll have some BCS computer tiebreakers in there to decide who plays in the SEC title game. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. So what do you make of the whole Joe Milton thing? Your Tennessee fans are all in, baby. I've heard them talking about it for 2 weeks. They want to see Nico. They want to see Nico start against Iowa and to go ahead and hand the reins over. We've not really heard anything on the Joe Milton part of this as to whether or not he's going to play. And like, to me, you could view it a couple of different ways. Number one, he needs all the film he can get, all the chances he can get to improve draft status. The other part of this is Iowa's defense is really good, and this could turn into kind of a ugly game in the bowl game coming up for Tennessee, and maybe he'd be better off not playing. What do you make of the Joe Milton part of this and what we're going to see for Tennessee as they take on Iowa coming up on January 1st?
My understanding is this is a difficult decision, and I think that's why we haven't heard anything. I think the thing is it should be imminent because this is the week that you're actually starting to practice, for Iowa. You got a scout team out there doing the Iowa stuff. So I would think any second we're going to hear about this decision. And I agree with what Caroline said in terms of Milton's draft. So this is not playing is not about, but it's not about the draft. It's stock, right? I mean, playing is just because he's the leader of the team and he wants to finish the season with his teammates, and that's why he would play. Because I would, as Joe Milton's agent, I would look at this game and say, that team, Iowa's played the same basic defense under Phil Parker for a quarter century, and it's been effective the entire time. And they play a zone 95% of the time. They play the cover 2 base, and they rally to the ball, and they let you dink all you want, and the ball's not going over their heads. Now, Milton could test that. But it's a very, as much fun as we make of Iowa this year, and they deserve it for their offense, and not just this year, but especially this year. Their defense is elite. It really is. It's excellent. And so if I'm his agent, I'm like, man, this game is just, is this game gonna help you? Are you gonna look good? Is that a team that in particular could make you look inefficient because you just have to you got to fit the ball in. You got to take the short stuff. You got to find the holes in the zone, and you just have to be satisfied just really taking the short stuff. I could see an agent looking at that game and saying, man, I don't like you, that being your last thing that people see on film, So I think a different opponent might actually, make it an easier decision to play. I still have always thought he was going to play. But I know Tennessee fans probably would, I mean, you overwhelmingly vote for him not to, right? So they can see a whole game of Nico. But it's the same thing with Nico. Like, just remember, if it is Nico, it's the same thing. Iowa is going to frustrate you. They're going to frustrate whoever they play. Like, it's not easy. It's actually kind of a fascinating matchup of schemes. So, I'm with them. It would be fun to watch Nico play a game. It would definitely be a tough first full game for him.
This just a big commentary on where we're at right now of a quarterback just struggling to make a decision whether or not he's going to play in a bowl game against Iowa coming up. Just it's a commentary on the modern state of college football. There's opt-outs left and right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, no doubt. I mean, look, it's and I, again, I guess this probably started, I don't know, not quite 10 years ago, right? Something like that. And it's kind of like the high draft picks, who one of these, I remember Jake Butt, Michigan tight end, Orange Bowl, tore his knee up terribly, and and it's like, oh man, the stuff like that, people use that as an example. Well, look, I mean, when you do, as soon as you went to like a playoff at all, it's weird how it made the bowls all really less important. It used to be like any sort of New Year's Day bowl game was really important, and it's just not the case anymore.
615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we'll get back into the Titans, get more of Joe's thoughts on the quarterback situation that Vrabel currently finds himself in heading into the game against Seattle. We'll take your thoughts on that as well. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Joe, we've got a lot of thoughts on the quarterback situation the Titans currently find themselves in. So Will Levis dealing with a high ankle sprain, very likely could shut him down, certainly for the game against Seattle, could shut him down the rest of the year. We'll wait and see what happens on that front. But should the Titans go with Tannehill? Should the Titans go with Malik Willis? We've got a lot of people that have weighed in this morning, Joe, that say that they want to see Malik Willis play. Tighten Up Tony on YouTube says, if I'm Tannehill's agent, I'm not letting him play behind that offensive line. What do you make of the idea that a lot of Titans fans seem to have this morning that they want to see Malik Willis these last 3 games?
Yeah, no, I'm sure they're very excited to see Malik play. They really have an excitement about his game and his improvement. You know, they just feel like he's just about to turn the corner. I'm sure there's a lot of real interest in his game. No, I get it. At this point, if you're a Titans fan, you're thinking draft positioning. I mean, the playoffs are officially over, so I'm sure people would enjoy like spoiling the Jags at the end. Maybe the Jags are playing to get in. That'd be probably fun to spoil that for them, or even, you know, going to Houston and somehow winning that game with Stroud playing. But for the most part, I think people are thinking about get the highest pick possible, and the best chance possible of that is Malik Willis playing. I can't imagine Tannehill and his agent saying that. Now, I mean, maybe an agent saying it to Tannehill, but I don't think that he would seriously consider it. I really don't. And I mean, people can think that's silly if they want. I understand, and I understand what you're saying. Like the offensive line is a disaster. So why do you want to go right back there and put yourself in harm's way? But I think that's kind of almost like the code here, right? And Tannehill is just not a guy that's going to be like, nah, I'm good, thanks. Play Malik. I think you're going to see Ryan Tannehill. I think it's very simple. But I understand all the conversation. And you know, I think Caroline made a good point about if the Titans are weighing the options and Malik Willis could be QB2. I mean, I have to consider him a possibility, right, to be QB2 next year. That's possible. You know, then some more game experience could be beneficial, but they've seen quite a bit of him, and I do think that the right move is to get a proven veteran at QB2.
I talked yesterday about fireable offenses. If they waltz into next season with Malik Willis as their backup quarterback, and I'll even put the caveat on it this way: if they waltz in there and they don't go sign a veteran and just plan on Malik Willis being the backup quarterback, that's a borderline fireable offense by Vrabel and Carthon this offseason. Like, you can't do that. With Will Levis being your starting quarterback, you have to have somebody behind him that is a veteran, that has played in some games, that gives you a better option to win some games if Malik Willis goes down. And if Malik Willis comes into training camp next year and he proves that he's better than whatever veteran you signed, then more power to him. That's a different scenario. But if their plan heading into this offseason is for Malik Willis to be the backup quarterback next year, that's a ridiculous plan.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I don't know, fireable strong, but I would agree that I think
fireable.
You know, hashtag fireable. I think
Yes.
I think that would be very surprising and disappointing if, like, there's not even any looking around there, you know. Just based on, again, Malik Willis has gotten better. I think Malik Willis is good enough to be a backup quarterback in the NFL, but in this particular situation, yeah, I think someone who has actually been in there, who has won games. I mean, who are the thing is, and this is always a fun exercise, you know, go through the NFL and name all the backups, and there's like 7 or 8 guys, and you'll be like, oh, who? Or, oh, he's still in the league? I mean, you know, there aren't 64 good quarterbacks, you know? So there are some teams that just have some bad ones. But, like, you look at even like a Case Keenum. You know, look at a Case Keenum in Texas. I mean, in Houston, you know, obviously they've got the rookie. They've got Davis Mills, who kind of they gave a shot at him, and now he's around. And they still have Case Keenum as well. You know, and that turns out to be pretty handy for them, and that's why they're still allowed to win the AFC South. So a guy like that. There just aren't a ton of guys, you know. You have to pay a little bit. I mean, the Titans kind of figured this out early in Vrabel's tenure. You know, they had they had Matt Castle. Well, I'm trying to think. So I guess that was pre-Vrabel. No, that's right. That was pre-Vrabel that they had Castle. That's right. When Vrabel got here, actually, I believe, and Castle is good friends with Vrabel, by the way, that they moved on. They moved on from Castle, and they upgraded to Blaine Gabbert, which I know now people may be like, oh, wow, great. But it was. At that time, like that was – you paid a little bit more, and, he gave the Titans a chance. He wasn't great, but he managed the game and gave them a chance in that winner in game against the Colts at the end of the season. Missed a couple throws that he wishes he could have back. But, I mean, that was at least a feasible attempt with a decent backup quarterback once you lost your starter. So they got to find a guy like that.
They got Minshew that's going to be available. Jameis Winston will be available. Baker Mayfield's a free agent. Josh Dobbs is a free agent. Marcus Mariota's a free agent. Oh, the reunion. It could be.
Wow.
Just bring Marcus back in here. That'd be something.
I mean,
they got a lot of options.
I think Baker is going to start somewhere, right? I mean, I think Baker has kind of reestablished himself. Dobbs is interesting because, there's a lot of Dobbs should have been the starter, and now it's kind of like, see, I mean, he's a good backup. He's a very good backup. He will be interesting. I would imagine that there'd be a pretty good market for him to have a guy like that. And the Titans, I mean, he was great. He came in here. He was Josh Dobbs, just an awesome dude who also can play the position. And that would not be a bad option at all. I feel like that's going to be a pretty hotly contested situation for him. If you're Dobbs, you'd probably like to look at a place where the starter is vulnerable, just like we thought with Mariota when he left here. Like, go try to back up Trubisky in Chicago. I mean, that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like vulnerability. Tannehill, I know he didn't choose it. He got traded, but he comes here, vulnerable starter, Marcus Mariota. So I don't know if Dobbs would love Levis in year 2 as his starter, but, hey, money talks too.
But what you just said is exactly what I think the approach should be. And I'm not saying that you go make a trade for it, but obviously, like the Titans, you brought up the Blaine Gabbert situation. They felt like they needed the upgraded backup quarterback. Marcus was the starter, and they had to have somebody at backup quarterback that they felt better about tossing into a game than Blaine Gabbert. And they traded for Tannehill, and it worked out better than anybody could have possibly imagined. He ends up being the starter. They go on a great run of football. And, Levis does not have, at this point, the injury history that Mariota did at that point. I mean, there was the nerve stuff with Mariota, and he had broken his leg. So it was a different thing then. But they valued backup quarterback, and they went and got it, and that guy ended up being, obviously, hugely important to what they did. Like I said, I'm not saying that you make a trade for a backup quarterback, but I do think when you start going through the checklist of priorities this offseason, it's not the offensive line. It's not wide receiver. It's not cornerback. It's not as important as those things. But somewhere on that list, backup quarterback needs to be on the priority list for the Titans.
Yeah, and the cap space that we've talked about so much, I mean, it could go a lot of ways. It could, if somehow T. Higgins does get to the market, then you got to you at least have to think, okay, this is a big chunk of it that we're trying to get him, But there may not be a pursuit like that, And even if there is, there should be enough to address some things. Again, I think, I just think addressing the offensive line and free agency, I mean, there's going to be some element of that, but it rarely works out that great, and that front works out better at receiver. But yeah, you need to set aside some money for sure for QB2, I think. Maybe they do. Maybe they think that Willis is good enough. And I mean, again, he's improved. I think you want someone who has gone out there and has won football games. Like Joshua Dobbs now has not only, I mean, he didn't win any for you. He came in and played pretty well. But like what he did in Minnesota this year totally elevates his stock to me. You need some, and there's other guys like that, guys who have actually gone in there and have played winning football. Malik Willis just hasn't done that yet.
What about the Tannehill front? I know it's only 3 games that are left in the regular season. Let's just say, for sake of argument, Levis is out, and it's going to be Tannehill the rest of the way. What's at stake for him in these 3 games? Is there a dramatic difference in the way that he's viewed, do you think, one way or the other by other teams this offseason? depending on how he plays these next 3 games.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So if Tannehill plays these next 3 games, is there a dramatic difference in the way that he's viewed depending on how he plays by teams that could be looking for his services?
Right,
or is it
right.
just 3 games and you already have one view of Tannehill and you either like him or you don't at this point?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think Tannehill, first of all, as we know, just even from some of these like QB tier things, and like there's some GMs in this league who think very little of him. So I think there's a range of opinions, but I don't know that he can really change things so much. Again, like his numbers are not. I mean, his numbers aren't going to be great. These last, I'm just going to assume Ryan Tannehill plays the last 3 games. Maybe by the finale he doesn't, but whatever. However much he plays, numbers aren't going to be great. If he gets some stuff done, given the circumstances, that's impressive. But yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think right now he's one of those guys. I mean, Baker Mayfield in the same situation, who is a good enough to start, but there's nobody out there signing up like, I want 5 years of that. I mean, no one's signed, even though Baker has played well this year. No one's like, you know what? Let's hitch our entire future to Baker Mayfield, right? I think it's the same way. It's like, well, he's a starter. In the meantime, we're going to draft someone, or we have to figure it out from there, like the Colts were doing, right? I mean, Tannehill would be a perfect Colts quarterback in their stretch of let's just try the next retread veteran who's good enough to start, blah, blah, blah. Matt Ryan, greatest leader of all time, might be the next Peyton Manning, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's how Tannehill's viewed. I think the Falcons would totally make sense next year. Arthur Smith's back. If Arthur Smith's back, if they don't trade for Justin Fields, for example. So I just don't know. I don't think much is changing on that front based on his performance here. I mean, anybody who pays any attention to the Titans knows it's a terrible situation for a quarterback right now.
Are you ready for a rant coming up next, or do we need the audible?
I mean, Nick, you got one? Oh, Nick wants me to do one. Why
not?
Why don't you ever do one?
I don't want to do one.
You're just too kind and gentle.
Okay.
Too nice.
Do you even know what happened when I ranted? Were you here? I'm trying to remember if you were here for my rant or not.
I think, I was here for one. Yeah, early on you tried one. Yeah.
I was not encouraged after PK was here. I could care less what PK had to say.
Oh, PK was dogging you.
Yeah. I didn't like it.
Yeah, well, that's what I have to deal with every Wednesday. Yes.
So Kuharski has scared off Keezer from ranting ever again, and he's intimidated Rexrode on Wednesdays.
I didn't enjoy it.
No, I get it. Now, well, Kuharski is a naysayer. He just, nitpicks everything in life. Everything,
And we need to nitpick all of your laptops. That's okay.
I mean, I guess I can come up with something. I just don't want to swear.
I'm sure it'll be very difficult for you. We'll have the Rex rant with Joe Rexrode coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
You know, obviously they made some plays. We had a hard time staying in front of them. At the end of the day, I'm just sick and tired of our guys getting smashed down there. Smashed! We'll get ready to play Tennessee. We were incredibly outmanned at the end. Had 4 guys on the bench in foul trouble. Joke!
It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning here on the program. Joe Rexrode's rant of the day. Joseph, in a morning full of rants, it's time for the real one. I turn things over to you, my friend.
Well, a really nice development just happened, which is, Nick Keyser gave me this nice wireless mouse, and then it stopped working, and I've lost my mouse, which is a wired mouse. Yes, I have a computer that doesn't, the stupid mouse, whatever finger pad doesn't work, so I have to use a freaking mouse. And I'm now texting with Katie, I'm like, please see where it fell out as I ran out of the house in a screaming rage. And, if I woke up some teenagers yelling angrily this morning, I don't feel all that bad about it. So I've lost the other mouse, but this one works. Of course, it also is now showing me again that this, what is this? An Aspire 5. Aspire. This is some stupid laptop. It's a PC that is proceeding as if it's 1996 and I'm dialing up on AOL. I mean, it's that bad. But you know what? This is a rant about me because we joke about my technological issues. The New York Times issued new computers, and I have a brand new MacBook. And I've had it for a long time. Don't clap. I've had it forever. And This is great. This is great. This is karma because yesterday I got an email. I've had them before. And the email said, I can't look at it because this stupid computer won't work. But the email said, essentially, you have not turned on your MacBook in, a long time. You need to log in and all the security stuff. This has happened several times. I've talked to IT people at New York Times who are like, so what's going on? I'm like, well, I'm intimidated by the MacBook and I don't know how to use it. And so I continue to use this crappy computer, which I stole from my high school junior who was a sophomore at the time because my car got broken into in Knoxville and I got my computer and a bunch of other crap stolen out of my car when I was trying to get dinner in Knoxville.
You did.
And so I continue to use this computer. I have this nice MacBook, and I'm just afraid. So I am. I've tried to use it, and I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like anything about it. Please help me.
Joe, I can help you.
Yeah?
Yeah, I just got one less than 2 months ago.
You're a MacBook person?
Yeah, I just switched over to it. I can help you out. I help my dad out all the time.
See?
I'm kind of surprised.
You just got to lean on people.
The way that Rexrode, he was going through his little spiel there, and he said PC with so much disdain in his voice that I thought that, he was going to be him turning into some MacBook snob, but now he's just afraid of it. I thought
I've always had PCs.
Totally trash PCs.
Yeah, well, I'm just trashing this one, but yeah, no, that's what I'm comfortable with. It just always, I've always had those, I don't even remember, all through the years of laptops, work laptops have always been PCs. And the thing is that we had a choice. And so my oldest son, who now is a sophomore in college, he talked me into, and the thing is he's back too. He's back from school right now, so he can help me too, in theory, if I can talk him into it. But he talked me into getting it. He's like, yes, get the MacBook. Because we had an option of a PC too. And it's like, no, the MacBooks are way better. I'm like, okay. And then I got it. I'm like, I don't like how things open. I don't like how honestly, I'm just going to sound like a great-great-grandfather if I keep talking about all the things I don't like. But
let's get deeper into it. What scares you the most about the MacBook?
Well, no, I'm using it is not comfortable. I can't find an application to write. Like, there's no Word. I mean, I guess you can get Word on it, right?
Yeah, you can get Word on it.
And then it's like I have a subscription already for the PC.
Do you not use Google Docs or anything like that, Joe?
I don't like Google Docs.
Why not?
Because I just don't like writing in them. I don't like how it works.
You can convert things to Word in like half a second.
Right, but ultimately I want Word.
Wow.
I want Word.
Who knew Keezer was such an expert?
I agree with you. I can see where you're going with this. I was like that too. I was like that in high school and my early days in college. But then all my classes had Macs. All of them. I had no choice.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've been weak about this, and I should have just forced myself. And I've been told that too by coworkers. And if I would have just forced myself, then we wouldn't have had the issue we had this morning when I'm trying to do the show on Zoom. And, it's like I have an Apple IIe in 1983. I keep thinking of computers from my youth.
I'm just saying. I used my laptop this weekend. Y'all were watching me sitting on my bed doing my show. It worked perfectly fine. At least you know it works.
So this microphone, this fancy microphone that I use, I assume that will also work with a Mac, or do I have to get some different adapter for it?
I've not seen your microphone, so I could not answer that question.
It should work. Yeah, it should work.
But it should, yes. If you have the right thing, yes.
Okay. Well, this has been a nice support group then. I hope people are totally ripping me on the text line, which I can't look at because of my stupid computer. But, I hope you are. I hope you're all ripping me.
Rexrode, just for some added motivation. You were around and fully embraced the typewriter when it was invented. You got through the typewriter. You got through the invention of the personal computer. You can get to the MacBook. I've got full confidence in you. You were around when the telephone was invented. You embraced it. Way to go.
Well, in all seriousness, I was around for typewriters. I took a typing class, one of the best classes I took in high school, because it taught me how to type, but we had typewriters. And then you had the little word processors. Those were fancy in the 90s, but pre-internet, but like a little word processor, and then you can like print out your paper you're writing for your class.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, like little Tandy type stuff,
Yeah, Josh from Murfreesboro says you should use it for 2 weeks. You'll never look back.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to dive headfirst into it. There's just no way around it, right? I just have to do it. So I'm gonna do it now. Thank you for the support group.
You're very welcome. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, what changes could be coming for the Titans after this season is over with? We'll get into that. We had some thoughts on that as well on our station yesterday, which we'll comment on. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Keezer, I'm going to give away some tickets off the top here. Welcome back in. Final hour. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. I got some tickets to give away. A pair of tickets to see the Music City Bowl, the Trans-Perfect Music City Bowl, as Auburn takes on Maryland at Nissan Stadium coming up on Saturday, December 30th. Be caller number 3, 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win a pair of tickets to see Auburn take on Maryland at Nissan Stadium coming up on the Saturday, December 30th at the Music City Bowl. 615-737-1025. So what changes could be coming for the Tennessee Titans this offseason? There are 3 games left in the regular season. They're not going to be in the playoffs. They're going to have a relatively high pick. We'll see what that ends up looking like. Right now they're at number 9. We'll see what that looks like as the season progresses here. What changes could be coming? Joe, we saw them fire the offensive coordinator last offseason. They fired the offensive line coach and Keith Carter. They shuffled around other members of the coaching staff in different roles. So we've seen a shakeup on the offensive side of the football for the Titans and some of the moves that they've made. What other changes do we think could happen this offseason? Are there any changes that you think will happen for the Titans this offseason? We had our good friend Jared Stillman hop on the radio yesterday and said that it's time to clean house and to fire Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon. I don't know that I expect that, but how do you view what it lies in front of the Titans and what changes we could see this offseason?
And we're talking staff. We're just talking staff changes.
We're talking staff.
Yeah, well, I don't think that. I don't think that. I've heard. I mean, I've basically heard the gist of Jared's spiel, which is if they don't clean house, then a year from now we're just going to be in the same spot, and then they will. And he compares it to like Brandon Staley, right? Which was like last year there were some people, especially when they blew that game to the Jags. Is it time to move? I mean, clearly he was coming in this season on the hot seat, and then of course now he's out. I don't look at this as the same situation. Again, I do think that you have to. I just think you really have to separate Vrabel and Carthon, which happens plenty, right? I mean, there's plenty of times when a head coach and a GM are. There's times when they're both moved out. The Raiders just did that, right? Raiders just moved on from their collaboration, whatever you want to call it. And then there's also obviously plenty of times, just like last year when John Robinson's fired and Vrabel is, if anything, elevated when that happens. I don't see how you could possibly Rand Carthon in his first year as GM. That's just idiotic. If you do that, if you were actually to do that, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Like if Amy Adams Strong, imagine that she actually did that. Like she actually thought like what Jared said made sense. I'm not saying she's taking his advice, but if she thought the same way, just a ridiculous way to think. How much would you be telling on yourself as a complete moron of an owner? I mean,
yeah.
You would be saying, I am a clueless owner. I just hired someone and sorry, he's fired. I'm firing everybody. And again, that's also following up the 2 huge extensions that you gave Vrabel and Robinson with a lot of money and a lot of term. So you're doing and again, yes, Vrabel probably gets scooped up. I mean, Robinson's like, he's cool. he's got paid for many years right now. Vrabel probably gets another job, so that offsets some of it from. But still, you did all this commitment. Okay, you picked one. When you pick Robinson, to me, that you could look at it like, wow, maybe Vrabel shouldn't feel so comfortable. I get it. And if you lose in this league, then there's some element of that anyway. But I look at it like you chose Vrabel, so you are riding with Vrabel. When you whether not saying it was a power struggle, but saying you made a choice. And so now you just hired Carthon. And this is my long way of saying that's stupid and that's not happening. Okay, it's not happening. It shouldn't happen. You would be a laughing stock in pro sports if you fired your GM. Because again, and first of all, like the GM's first draft, although like right now we're talking about a game which Skoronski looked rough, but the GM's first draft looks pretty promising, I'd say. Right, first free agency group, the big signing was a disaster. So there's no getting around that. But that's, I mean, the entirety of what he's done. If we're gonna say him, I still look at it like they. But if we're gonna look at the entirety of the offseason, Brunskill, okay, I'll share, okay. Key, not great. Dillard, absolute disaster. Draft class, pretty good. That's fireable? I mean, come on. That's not fireable. You didn't even ask me to talk about all this stuff. Maybe I still have.
No, keep going.
No, yeah, I'm just going to blab the entire segment. I think that there's a possibility of some coaching changes. Yes. I don't think Tim Kelly's one of them. I think the O-line coach, I think it's a talent issue, but you're talking about the assistant of the guy who got fired, which I thought was weird in the first place. So is it possible they look to upgrade there? That to me would top the list of possibilities. What about you?
Well, I do wonder about Shane Bowen. I think it's fair to say, even though we have seen moments this year where the defense has played really well, like the Miami game, they were outstanding. So I don't know that I would say that it's likely, but I do wonder. I think we would all agree this defense is underachieved this year, right? So when you've got an underachieving defense and a team that's going to end up 5-12 or 6-11 or whatever it is they end up here, do you take a look at the defensive coordinator? You've already moved on from an offensive coordinator. I'm with you. I don't think that they're going to move on from Tim Kelly after 1 year. Do you think there's a chance that they take a look at Shane Bowen?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. Obviously, those guys have worked together a long time, and it's been pretty significant ups and downs. And the weirdness of the way it started, with not giving him the title. Yeah, I would say that's possible. It's amazing how it works in this league, because it was a couple years ago that Shane Bowen was definitely one of those names that was popularly thrown in with there's always the coordinator, the list of coordinators who might be head coaching candidates, and Shane Bowen's name was definitely being thrown around. They had a great defense. They bounced back from 2020, bad defense, no pass rush, to have a great defense with a fierce pass rush, and Shane Bowen is talked about as a head coaching candidate, and now could he be on the hot seat? I wouldn't rule it out. I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised by that. But I suppose I can't rule it out. I mean, that's the part of this team that is more surprising. I mean, the offensive line, we wondered if it could be okay. It obviously hasn't been. The defense, we thought, can it be great? And it's been below average. So relative to expectations, I think that's a clear place to look. I would be surprised if he made that move.
I would be too. I don't think that you can totally dismiss it. I don't think Vrabel wants to do that. I don't think that Vrabel is getting to the end of the season all right, I got to get Shane Bowen out of here. But I do think when that side of the football has been we know the limitations of the offense and the offensive line and all of those things. There have been too many games this year where the defense has not played well enough. And the interesting part about that is Danico Autry has 11 sacks. He's having a career year from a sack standpoint. Harold Landry's got 8.5 right now. He's going to end up, he might end up with 10 as well. If you would have told me before the year that Autry would have 11 sacks and Harold Landry coming off a torn ACL would end up around double-digit sacks, I would say, okay, well, this Titans defense is going to be really good, and it's going to be everything we thought it could be in the preseason, and it's just not been that way. Arden Key has not been what we thought he could be as we looked at him in training camp and in the preseason.
He looked great against Dillard, though.
To that. He did look great against Dillard.
He crushed Dillard.
Question. And he looked great that first half against the Saints game. And look, he's flashed a couple of times the last few weeks where, he went through the middle part of the season where he was a ghost out there. So he's been a little bit more visible lately, but that's a long way of me saying, if you would have told me before the year Harold Landry was closing in on double-digit sacks coming off an ACL and Danico Autry had 11 sacks, I would have thought this defense would have been everything we thought it could be in the preseason, and it's just not.
No, it's a great point. And in tandem with, Jeff Simmons has had a good year. I mean, he's been good.
Yeah.
Some weeks better than others, but still, he's been good, and he's had some really good weeks. That's a great point. It's like those numbers alone, and you're like, oh wow, okay, well this is going to work out pretty well. But they haven't been able to stop the run this year, and again, I do think that's like they're not good enough at linebacker, but also up front they've just been inconsistent. And obviously, I mean, you think about early in the season, Fulton either getting hurt or making devastating mistakes, like in that Indy game on the road, for example. Then they trade away Byard, and they're not good in the back end. And I give Monty Hooker credit. Monty Hooker's out there playing like an all-pro with not a ton of help around him. But they're not, they're just deficient at more spots than I certainly thought going into the year.
615-737-1025. What changes do you think could be or should be coming for the Titans this offseason with the coaching staff? 615-737-1025. Our phone number. More of your thoughts on that coming up next. We'll have John Glennon from the Nashville Post joining us at 8:30. All that ahead. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care and the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll have John Glennon from the Nashville Post coming up here in just a few minutes at 8:30. Kyle on the text line says, has Jeff Simmons lived up to being a top 2 or 3 tackle in the NFL? I feel like he's been good. I don't feel like he's been great, like he's getting paid to be. This from Kyle on the text line. Joe, what do you think of that?
I think that's fair. I think especially like some of these games where they haven't stopped the run. I mean, it's not all on one guy, but I mean, Simmons is kind of, you pay a guy like that to be two things, to be, a guy who dominates up front, so disruptive that teams can't run, and also gets his own in the passing, in the pass rushing department a certain amount too. And I think that, Jeffrey Simmons has been great in some games. And I mean, look, Simmons is one of those situations where, and it's just the nature of the position, I would invite anyone to watch all 22 replays of games and just watch him. And I think in some games, after people are like, Jeff Simmons, is he really, because he didn't make a lot of plays. If you watch some of these games, you'll see him dominating consistently. So I'm probably a little higher on him than maybe some people, he's a dominant player. But I agree, ultimately when it comes down to it, you're paid to wreck games like Aaron Donald and Chris Jones and Quinnen Williams, and I don't think he has played at that level this year. So I think that's fair. I think if he plays at this level, he's played it this year, and the biggest thing is if he doesn't get hurt, if he's available, it's going to end up being a good investment. Okay? Maybe not. Again, I guess when you pay that money, you're hoping he's the next Aaron Donald. And we remember the game in Los Angeles a couple years ago. We went in there and stole the show from Aaron Donald, and just destroyed that game, But you're also you're not going to get that every game. I think he's right now. I think it's a good investment. I think it was the right thing to do. The big question with him is definitely health as he gets older here moving forward. Is he going to be able to give you 17-game seasons? That's 2 years in a row now that he has had an injury.
Matt from Camden on the text line says, I know T.R. Tart missed some time this season, but do you think him being out of shape and being disgruntled about the contract made that big of a difference in the run defense? I feel like if the Titans had Tart from last year or the year before, the run defense wouldn't have been this bad. This from Matt from Camden.
Yeah, it's a good I think with Tart, I think some of Tart's sort of inconsistencies can be attributed to, or some of the run stopping issues can be attributed to that a little bit. I think he was inconsistent. It was pretty obvious early on. Go back to camp. Vrabel had comments in camp about his conditioning. So I think they thought he was going to be one thing, and he wasn't that consistently. And again, at times, we could put together a highlight clip of T.R. Tart this year that's like, oh my God, right? I mean, he made some plays, and he absolutely can be a dominant run stopper in there. But I think that they were leaning on him for a little bit more for another step. And again, it's too bad because I think that if T.R. Tart this year was what they thought he was going to be, he would also be looking at a multi-year, pretty darn good contract right now. And I think what he's going to do is someone's going to give him another 1-year flyer now because of all this stuff. I mean, he's too good not to. Well, I mean, the Texans have picked him up, so there you go. T.R. Tart will be looking for his revenge on the Titans in 10 days or whatever, in 12 days. But if he would have been what they thought he was going to be this year, then they would be better, and also he would be looking at, I think, a pretty juicy contract coming up. It's too bad to see this because it's just when it comes down to it. I know I don't like to get into the whole. There's some noise coming from the Titan side, that's sort of ripping him a little bit, but ultimately, I mean, you've kind of seen it play out with some of his tweets and everything like that. And like with Terrell Williams, the way he responded to questions about Tart a few weeks ago, that kind of said a lot to me. Like they've been really frustrated with him. It's just too bad to see because he's a great story. he's an undrafted guy who comes in and has a chance to be a real difference maker in the NFL and really carve out a nice career. Maybe he still will, but this year didn't help him.
Joe, going back to the staff change front, they just fired Keith Carter last year, and they bring in Jason Hoteling, and we've gone through Vrabel's process there and talking about the interview. And look, I have no idea whether or not Jason Hoteling is a good offensive line coach. I think a lot of what we've seen on the offensive line this year, either one predates him with some of the selections that have been made, or number two, they've just picked had poor choices this year with Andre Dillard and the way that they decided to handle things. Having said that, with as bad as the offensive line has been these last 2 years, and by the way, Hoteling has been here for both of those. He was an assistant 1 year, now is the offensive line coach. I do think it kind of goes back to the old adage, like if you're Mike Vrabel and you feel like there's somebody that's out there that can do a better job, I think if I may be Adam Strunk, I'm saying, why don't you go get me another offensive line coach? Like with as bad as it's been, and I get it. It's not, in my opinion, it's not all fair to put on the offensive line coach this year because of, I think, just a lack of ability they've got there in some degree. Now, having said that, like how much better has a Dylan Raditz got? How much better did a Nicholas Petit-Frere get from year 1 to year 2? I mean, he wasn't in there very much. He didn't look like he got much better to me. So I think the idea of the Titans moving on from Hoteling even after 1 year is beyond fair, given how bad that group's been this year.
Yeah, before they move on from him, we figure out how to say it. Is it Hoteling? It might be Hoteling. And I've been
says
saying
Hoteling on the official pronunciation sheet. So that's what I'm going with.
Hufteling. I mean, there's so many different ways you can go with it. Okay.
Big H.
Right. Hoteling is a way. As a way that we're going, that just tells you right there. It's a very short stay for him. Again, everybody knows Vrabel said it was one of the best interviews he's had. Yeah, I think it's just the question. I'm down on the idea that it is that guy's fault. Not saying that because they have a personnel issue. Like I know anytime we talk about O-line coaches, someone's going to bring up Mike Munchak and say just get him in there and he'll coach him up. But
we already got it on the text line.
There you go. But first of all, I mean, he's retired. I mean, hey, give it a shot, right? Give it a call. But, there's just limitations. I mean, there's just limitations on what position coaches can do if they don't have talent. But at the same time, I'm with you. Like, you're charged, to me, number one, with fixing that situation. You talked about fixing it a year ago. You didn't. So fixing it is obviously bringing in new players, but it's also saying what is the absolute – I mean, Vrabel last year went out and he fired Anthony Midget and he went and he got Chris Harris because he wanted the absolute best. Like, who is the hottest candidate out here coaching defensive backs who people are talking about hiring as a D coordinator? Well, he went and got him. Who's that with the offensive line? I think you need to think about things like that. And Amy Adams Strunk, we talk about the cap space and all that stuff. Well, that's also where she comes in too. Because I promise you that you had to go to the owner to hire a Chris Harris because you're talking about a guy who people are trying to hire as a DC. Well, if you're going to do that in the offensive line, then she has to be willing to also invest in that stuff. So that's part of this equation too. The owner's got to not be cheap on any front.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by John Glennon from the Nashville Post. We'll get his thoughts on the Titans and their path forward. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. And we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend John Glennon from the Nashville Post. Johnny, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing great. Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So, John, we were just talking about the Titans, the path forward here, the coaching staff. Rabel makes changes to the coaching staff last year, fires the OC, fires the offensive line coach, shuffles some things around in other spots. How do you view the coaching staff right now? Do you feel like more changes could be coming this offseason? Do you think it's going to be running it back and seeing if you can make better selections in the offseason player-wise? How do you view what the Titans have in front of them right now with decisions to make on the coaching staff?
I think, anytime you've had a season like this, as was the case last year, I think changes probably need to be made. I can't think you blame it all on personnel. I think coaching has to be better in some areas as well. And I think one area, though, that I think you run into maybe sort of a question mark is guys that are in their first years this year. Do you give them more than 1 year, even though maybe their position is struggling? Do you say, all right, I owe it to them to give more than 1 year at a job? And I'm thinking, like corners with Chris Harris. I'm thinking offensive coordinator with Tim Kelly. I'm thinking offensive line with Jason Odeling. Guys like that, their positions haven't improved. The players under them haven't necessarily improved this year. But do you say, okay, it's tough to turn everything around in 1 year, and give them that, at least that second year as well? Or do you say, look, we were terrible in a lot of spots. We've got to, some heads have to roll. We've got to make some changes. And those are some of the guys that come to mind anyway. So it's going to be an interesting situation in that regard.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you in charge. What are you doing? How are you divvying up the responsibility for this mess?
Wow. In terms of coaches that would go, you mean?
Yeah, do you think? I mean, because we've been talking about Hodling and probably butchering his name along the way, but it's like the idea of, first of all, I thought it was weird that you fire an O-line coach and hire his assistant. Vrabel talked about how great his interview was. Also, last year, Vrabel fired Anthony Midget and went out and just tried to find, to me, like, who's the star defensive backs coach out there in the NFL? Chris Harris had DC offers, right? So he went and got him. Like, do you look at that on the O-line and say, who is, you go try to, like, I don't know who it would be, but I'm just wondering if, do you feel like it's necessary or if this is more of a personnel issue in your mind?
I lean towards more personnel, honestly, but still, even if your personnel isn't great, I think you still have, responsibility and the opportunity to make your players better anyway, and we haven't seen enough of that at some of those positions. So, again, I come back to, though, like, some of those guys we talked to, like, on the offensive line, I think at cornerbacks as well. Is it fair to them, to give them just, the 1 year and say, you had your chance, we're out, so sorry about the bad personnel, or are you more lenient and you say everybody at least deserves a second year in this kind of job? I'm not sure. I mean, he gave Kelly now and say things aren't working out as well. I better cut my losses earlier than Todd Downing. I'm not certain of that, but certainly I do think there will be some change. I just don't think you can stand pat again after a year like this.
John, on the quarterback front, Will Levis dealing with a high ankle sprain, and we'll see what that looks like in terms of his availability the rest of the way here. Number one, if you're the Titans, would you just go ahead and shut him down at this point, given the offensive line that he's playing behind? And number two, if that's the case, who you putting in a quarterback, Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis to close out the season?
Well, I don't automatically shut him down for one. I guess it all depends on the severity of the ankle sprain. I mean, he's a young guy. He's healed quickly this year.
I would certainly doubt, say, this weekend that he's back in. But if he is ready and he's mobile and he's moving around the last couple of weeks, I certainly still think game experience, even behind a bad line, is a good thing. I don't think it automatically. You have to be so concerned that you're sitting guys out. If he can't play, and my guess again, certainly this week would be tough. I think you can make an argument kind of for both the other quarterbacks starting. And obviously if you go with Tannehill, you say, hey, maybe we'll give the vet, who's done so much for this team, who's been a great leader in his day. Maybe we'll give him a little bit of a send off here at home. We kind of owe it to him, to give him maybe another game to play him. I wonder if you're Tannehill, are you really excited about getting in there if the opportunity is given? Obviously I'm sure he would step up, but A, playing behind this line, B, you're going into an off season that you're going to be looking for a new contract. You certainly don't want to go in there hurt into the off season. And again, there's no playoff motivation either. I wonder if there's any mixed feelings if it is Tannehill and he goes in there. But I can also see making a bit of a case for Malik, too, in that maybe this is the last chance, really, for Malik Willis to say, okay, I've learned something. I'm a little bit better. I can show some potential as an NFL quarterback, even if it's just as a backup. Give me one more chance. Give me a game or two start, and I'll show you something. So, I can see both ways going about it. I wonder, too, one more factor. Maybe if you're Mike Vrabel and you're at all concerned about your job at the end of the season, maybe that causes you to lean more towards Tannehill. Obviously more experienced and more likely to come out with a victory or two if he's starting than Malik Willis. So maybe that plays into it as well.
Well, I think you just hit on the last thing for me that makes it very simple. I mean, whether you're actually worried about your job or not, you're trying to win. If you're Mike Vrabel, you're not signing up for any losses. And those guys in the room, if you went to Willis, no, you're unserious about winning, right? I mean, I don't see how you can justify that decision to the guys in the room that you're asking still for 3 more weeks to come in and work all day and try to win football games. I mean, that's just how I look at it. But on the Willis topic, John, Robby says it's a fireable offense if they don't go get a veteran backup, experienced backup. I'm going to get you to fire someone today on the program. So what do you say about that? What do you say about the idea of Malik Willis as QB2 next year? Should that be any sort of consideration?
Well, one way to prove that, Joe, is if you put him in the last couple of games and get a better idea. And obviously the results so far with Malik Willis have not been good. There haven't been a whole lot of reasons to think that he is any type of quarterback for the future, even if it is only QB2. But maybe you get more of a sense of that in that last game or two. As it stands right now, I would have serious concerns about him being the QB2 moving forward. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen because the NFL only has so many decent quarterbacks, and even though we haven't seen much from Malik, you still run into the issue of like who are you going to have if not him. He's a guy that at least knows the system, at least has experience, has played in some games for the Titans. So, I wouldn't completely rule that out, but in a perfect world, I'd certainly like to have someone I feel better about going in there than Malik Willis at this point. Again, maybe give him a shot at one or two of these last games, give him one last opportunity to say, hey, I've really, I've soaked some things in. I've learned a little better. Maybe Will Levis's success has motivated me that much more. Give him a shot to show something.
John, last thing for you here. How do you view the Derrick Henry situation as it currently stands? His contract's up after this year. He'll be 30 in January. How much value do you think there would be if you're the Titans to bring him back? Or do you think it's time to just move on and start a different era here in Tennessee?
Yeah, I think it'll probably come down to what type of money is involved. You can make a case for Derrick Henry to come back, again, saying that, if you can find a way to better the offensive line to the point that Derrick Henry is going to get those first couple steps without getting hit in the backfield or right at the line of scrimmage, that Derrick Henry could still be a very good back. But there's also a case to be made, I think, for moving on when you look at some of the numbers for Derrick Henry that are kind of gradually been declining. Even last year, right, he was playing behind a pretty crummy line, was still averaging, over 4 yards a carry, still went over 100 yards 9 times. This year, he's right at 3.8 right now, yards per carry, which is the lowest of his career. He's only had, I think, 3 games over 100 so far. And you look at some of the numbers, like yards over expectation, missed tackles forced, a lot of the analytical type numbers, and they're sliding. They're not as good as they used to be. So you wonder at some point, does it become a little counterproductive for the Titans to be giving Derrick Henry the ball 15, 20, 25 times a game? In the past, you could say that was certainly productive because even if he gets stuffed 5, 6, 7 times a game, you're still going to count on a few breakaway runs and some explosive runs. Now, I don't think you're necessarily seeing, that production outweigh the number of stuffs or even negative yardage that we're seeing. So if you think your line is going to be better, if you can get Derrick Henry back at a reasonable contract, I think that's a big win, for the franchise. But if it costs too much, I can certainly see this team moving on from Derrick Henry.
Well, John, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Hi, Johnny.
That's what John Glennon from the Nashville Post, our guest on Robby and Rexrode. Coming up next, it is time for Preds Pick to Click. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. If you guess a goal scorer for the Predators tonight, you win a pair of tickets to a future Nashville Predators home game. We will do that next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
It's time for Preds Picks to click.
And a shot of the score.
Do you think you know who will score a goal in tonight's Predators game?
Little give and go.
Shoot your shot for a chance to win Preds tickets. Call 615-737-1025 now. Pick to Click is brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. Visit tjandersonhomes.com to see why they are preferred so often. It's Pick to Click, now on Robby and Rexrode.
It is that time of the day, time for Preds Pick to Click here on Robby and Rexrode, presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. The Preds back in action tonight at Bridgestone Arena, taking on the Vancouver Canucks. A standings update in the competition. So last time out, every single person got a correct answer except for me. So the listeners improved to 8 correct answers. Joe Rexrode with 7, Nick Keyser with 5, and I remain on 2, which I'm pretty sure I've been at since like the second week of the season. So congratulations, Joe, to everybody except me last time out.
I think at this point, it's your responsibility, it's your civic duty to only pick guys who wouldn't care if they don't score. Like, you have to just pick, like, Cole Smith and Jeremy Lazan and stuff like that every game now. I'm sorry.
Maybe so.
You've not hit on one since November 9th.
They're going to start blaming you, and then it's going to get ugly in the locker room, and like we don't need that.
That's a long time ago. November 9th, a long time to go in a drought in this competition. With that in mind, let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Terry. Terry, good morning. Who is your pick to click for the Nashville Predators?
Good morning, guys. Well, I'm going to stay consistent with the listeners. I got to go with Forsberg, man.
Going with Philip Forsberg. Terry, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Forsberg, the selection. Joe Rexrode, he's the popular pick right now. He's off the board. You're up first. Your pick to click for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, you listeners need to get a little bit more creative. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to do this. It's not a right. And I'd like some of you to be a little bit more creative in your choices. Okay, although I did appreciate the Peter Forsberg pick last week.
I agree. If we can get Anton Forsberg next, that we could really roll this thing out.
There you go. I hate being the first pick when a listener doesn't do something goofy and not take Forsberg, and take Forsberg. How about that's what's really interesting about this team. It's like
it's a big stall.
It's just like it's Forsberg, and right now there's just such a drop. But I mean, I've been right just about every time too. So who am I going to pick? Who's going to score tonight? Who's going to be excited to score? I'll go Ryan O'Reilly.
That was a long way to get to a guy who's second in the league in power play goals right now. Long way to get there. Way to go.
I'm trying to spread holiday cheer to whoever may need it.
Thank you. Forsberg, O'Reilly off the board. Nick Keyser, your pick to click for the Nashville Predators.
I should just let you go before me. Do you want to go before me, Robby?
Shut up and make a pick. Make a pick.
I tell you what, I think he's been on a hot streak lately, and I think he will look like himself again tonight. Yakov Trenin. I think he will score a goal against the Vancouver Canucks, and I guess little called shot. Let's make it a game winner tonight.
Wow.
I'm going Tommy Novak. I picked him last week. I swear to you, Joe, I had the first pick. The caller picked Forsberg, and I was like, you know what? Yossi. Sounds like a good one. I didn't do it, and I talked myself into Tommy Novak, and lo and behold, Yossi scores, and I was kicking myself watching the Predators game that night. But I'll go Novak. I think he's been a little slow out of the gate coming back from the injury, but I think he finds one tonight. Novak, my selection. So my apologies to Tommy Novak.
Yeah, sorry, Tommy. It's a tough one. He's nice, though, so he probably won't punch you in the face when he doesn't score.
Fred's pick to click here on Robby and Rex. So, by the way, coming up between 9 and 11, Chase and Big Joe will have your chance to win tickets to see Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band at Nissan Stadium on Saturday, August 3rd. Plus, today's winner will also qualify to win a $250 Electronic Express gift card. That's between 9 and 11 a.m. today with Chase and Big Joe. Final thoughts real quickly, Joe, on the Preds. Going for win number 14 out of 17 games tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. We talked about it to begin the show, but they're on a heck of a run right now. Can they keep this thing going? How sustainable do you think this is in terms of not necessarily the pace that they're at right now, but being a factor in the Western Conference?
It's a great question. And speaking of O'Reilly, that's exactly a question I asked him yesterday. The sustainability of this, because teams go on hot streaks, they go on cold streaks. We've seen this team look really good and not great already this year. But, I mean, the obvious difference, I think, is Saros, right? I mean, Saros right now is playing Vezina-level hockey. Early in the year, I think it was even a slower start than normal. Andrew Burnett talked yesterday about, some of the help that they're trying to give him, too. And maybe – I love the expression he used yesterday. We don't want defensemen trying to play goalie, giving him lanes and things like that to see the puck. And so it just seems like they just have a real confidence right now. O'Reilly does think it's sustainable, especially in terms of like how they have leaned into close games late and taken on the pressure of the moment and sort of embrace it. Whereas I think it was, in fact, I think it might have been your question for O'Reilly when they were in their downstretch, where it was like, what was the quote? Basically, like, just keep finding ways to lose, right? Like, just it's now they're finding ways to win. You never want to. God, am I making up for lost time by just blabbing on and on whenever you ask me a question? I feel like I'll just stop talking. Sorry. We'll see. Should be a good game. Should be a good game tonight. Preds Canucks. I'll see you guys at Bridgestone.
We'll try again tomorrow.
I'll bring my computer.
For us today here on Robby and Rexrode. A legendary show. Put this one in the Hall of Fame. Chasing Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.